Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. It's the blackest heart, the blackest mind, the blackest man on social media, signing black in and shining again, asking you to hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. That being said, I'll get straight to this. BGS is not the enemy. We have old fools in our community and actually teaching young guys foolish lessons, telling them things like, don't you never turn down no pussy. Get all the pussy you can. This is a common refrain from old niggas to young guys in the neighborhoods. And I'm sick of hearing that. What that does is it tells young guys that male genitalia not only is of no value, but that it is of a negative value. And that in order to be restored to normality, you must rack up a bunch of vaginas, high body count. And therein lies your manhood. That's what this is about. BGS is not one of these old fools. He simply says, we have to fix things internally and externally. He doesn't say that we don't need to work on ourselves. What he does say is that the outside enemies are not going to sit back and vanish because we worked on ourselves. If we all wore suits, all pulled our pants up, and there were no itnesses, no pookies, none of that. If we didn't even have tattoos and gold teeth, and we were all straight-laced, white supremacists would still brutalize us from behind badges. When I listened to the panel from the 7th, that's what I heard him trying to get at. Mr. Fantastic, I've enjoyed your content, and I've actually benefited from it. Because when I listened to it, that was one of the ways that I could tell that a lot of these PUAs and dating coaches and pro game experts and this sort of thing weren't actually correct, that they were not sufficient for our people. Telling the men that we need to learn game and learn the games that women play and learn how to not be the one on whom they want to play the games, to me, is just as stupid. Now, not as outrageous per se, but it's just as stupid as when some men try to tell women this is how to not be selected for rape. Because now rape is far more outrageous than, let's say, a lady trying to scam a guy out of free dinner. I get that. But telling men that if you don't do this, that, and the other, they're going to do this, that, and the other, and they can't help it, and it's your fault, is akin to saying to a lady, well, if you wear this, then you're going to be raped, and he can't help it, it's not his fault. And it was from gentlemen like you that I actually picked up on this and saw it from this side and was able to say, wait, you know what? No, to hell with this. These coaches have no business telling us men to let these ladies slide doing anything that they would not tolerate us doing to them. If we're not allowed to use them for anything sexually or non-sexually, they're not allowed to use us. End of story. I was like, oh, wow. And I got this partially from you. But now there's a debate about what we're going to do about the pookies as we move forward. Do we take all the pookies and leave them behind? And do we take the pookies with us? Do we take them with us even if they're still pookies? And do we leave them behind even if they're reformed pookies? And this is a binary thinking. And what I wanted to get at was that BGS is not that binary. So by him saying what he said, he was not trying to tell black people to disavow all accountability and responsibility for decisions that we actually do make and over which we have control. He was saying that when we do this, we're still going to have outside enemies. Just like you were not trying to say that George Floyd was supposed to die. You weren't trying to say that they were supposed to kill him. You were trying to say that he could have avoided it. And I'm not really sure. Honestly, I believe that had some officers who did not know him been called in or responded, I think he'd have been alive, because the one that actually killed him is also the one that knew him. And yes, witnesses that know them both from the club or the bar in which they used to work together as security have said that Chauvin had it in for George. But it wasn't just George. What I can tell you, though, is this. You might not like the fact that there are protests on behalf of George Floyd. I'm going to tell you that actually, Mr. Fantastic, they were necessary internationally. And here's why. We were being demonized before. It wasn't always effective, but to a certain extent, sometimes it was. Now, I remember back in 1999. No, I'm sorry, back in 2000, when I was living in Atlanta. And I remember when I moved into a house owned by a Palestinian. I was renting. And then some other Arabs rented out other rooms in the house. We were roommates. I remember the Jordanian was fair as hell. You had to screw up and do something wrong before you got in trouble with the Jordanian. He was just fair across the board. He did not profile people. He just didn't do it. I remember this. There was a Qatari that we lived with. He was the only Gulf Arab in the house with his Ethiopian-looking self. And I say that as a compliment, because Gulf Arabs actually do look like East Africans because they're the descendants of East Africans. He was the only one in the house that had kinky hair. The only one. Nobody else had it. Not even me. I'm African American. He would go to the salon. He had to go to an African American salon to get his hair straightened. I told him eventually, if you don't stop going there, I'm going to kick your ass. I'm sick and tired of you going there and trying to get your hair straightened out. Like something's wrong with it, being African. I straight told me, I'm tired of this mess, man. He was brainwashed. I said to him one day, after a while, because he started to get rid of the brainwashing, I said to him one day, hey, listen, man, what did your parents say when you told them one of your roommates was African American? And he said, they said to me to be careful. And I said, where did they get this from? He said, from television. Now, back then, most of the television that you could see in Arabic-speaking countries was from the 1980s. That was one of the major differences. This was 2000. But the movies were largely from the 80s that they could see on satellite TV and all that. And so I understood that there was a propaganda. What I'm getting at here is that now the demonization may be a bit less successful, but to a certain extent, it's still there. That's what's important to understand. And there was this perception that when black people got killed by cops, automatically they were doing something wrong. Mike Brown. And there was a perception that they had guns. What happened, you see, in 2014, when some of these protests happened, I remember some Arabs telling me, yeah, but these guys weren't innocent. And I told them, no, nigga, they were. But not only that, white people were fighting with cops, hitting them, punching them, resisting arrest, stealing their cars and getting away with it alive. Cops weren't killing them. That's what I want you to understand. Police officers were not killing white people. They were killing black people. Then they started killing white people too. And I had to tell them they've been killing black kids and getting away with it. They shot a black girl 7 years old through the head and got away with it in Detroit. They killed a sleeping couple in a car and got away with it. They kill black people who run, and then this went on and it went on and it went on. And I had to tell my friends here in this country about these cases, and they didn't believe it at first, and then 2016 happened. And the protests began. I remember because it was only a few days after Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were killed that I had to fly back from the United States over here to the Gulf to go back and come back teach summer school. I remember that while I was in the air, I remember I landed and I was on the plane from, I remember when I was on the plane from Riyadh to go back to the country that I live and work in, the guy next to me said, "Oh, you're from the U.S.?" "Yes." "Why are the police shooting the protesters?" And I said, "They doing what?" And he said, "Yeah, they're locking them up. They're making like massive arrests for the protest and locking them up and everything else. And some protesters even being shot." And I said, "Oh my God, I was not aware of this. I knew that they were having demonstrations, but not okay." See, I learned some of the news while I was in the air. And this was a turning point because when I got back to the city in which I lived and worked at that time, all of a sudden the argument stopped. People were careful about asking me, "Are you sure you're not just imagining the racism you said you were fleeing from in the U.S.?" Then 2020 came. And now people understand, even internationally, black folks are being demonized and they're being persecuted in the United States still. That the racism they thought ended with Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech, because a lot of people thought that. A lot of them did think that. It's not over yet. It's still going on. The protests were necessary. If it had to be for George Floyd, it had to be for George Floyd. I don't like what George Floyd did when he got himself arrested the last time. I really don't. I wish that she had been able to kill that pregnant black woman had been able to kill all of them to a certain extent. But by the same token, that's not why he was killed. He wasn't killed because he was Idnis. He wasn't killed because he was Pookie. He was killed because he was big and he was black. Chauvin pretty much wanted to just throw out any black person that ever got in trouble. And people knew one thing I know about Chauvin, and I never met him. I know this from witnesses, and I know this because I know white folk. Chauvin is the kind of white guy that believed in giving white folks second chances, not black people. That right there is an inconsistency. That right there is racial injustice. And that's why he put his neck on George Floyd, that's why he put his knee on George Floyd's neck and kept it there. He didn't fiv a guck. That's why he did it. And there are many cases wherein police have had misconduct. We know that the police have been infiltrated by white supremacist organizations. The FBI said it. So I'm sorry, but Mr. Fantastic, you out of line when you just snapped on BGS. Not because you disagreed per se, but because it's like you took him as an enemy of black people almost. Like he was leading us down the wrong path because he pretty much said George Floyd wasn't killed because of nothing he did. Even the fentanyl in his system, that's not why he was killed. And ain't why he's dead. We don't have to argue about that. A white man put his knee on a black man's neck when the black man said, "I can't breathe," then started to call out to people that weren't even there, which seems to be a sign of hallucination, and killed him. That's what it was. And he wasn't supposed to do it according to his own police department's rules. A man that was handcuffed wouldn't have been able to get up without assistance. Laying down, talking about, I can't breathe. All he could have done was just take the pressure off the man's neck. Nope, wouldn't do it. Now, he could have kept his weight on the man's back so that George wouldn't roll over or try to get up or anything like that, but that's not what he did. No, he kept the pressure on his neck till he was silent. People, and it had to be videotaped in order for people to be outraged. And right now, where I live, sir, it's better for us at this point, because as far as I'm concerned, you see now some other folks are beginning to discuss their own anti-black bias. And I don't really particularly care that they like us. What I do care about is that they come to an understanding that we have every right to bash their heads in as much as they would think they have for us to bash ours in if we just oppress them because of what they are and their phenotype and their genotype. This is, in fact, beginning to make certain things easier for black folks abroad, because it ain't going to change in the United States. White America's not going to take their foot off our necks. Many white folks are out there protesting because they know white folks, and they know that they're sick of their people's BS, and they're sick of the lying, and they're sick of the conservatives among them trying to act like, well, it's not because they're black, it's because they sag their pants. They don't care what white kids do. They don't care about the styles and the fashions and the fads of white kids. They don't even care about the crimes of white kids. No, they're kids. Let them. They're going to do certain things. We already know. As soon as a black 9-year-old does something that's actually very normal, they're characterized as being aggressive and bad. They don't even like it when, we're not even supposed to drive fast. So, you catch a white kid with cigarettes, they're kids, they're going to do dumb stuff like that. Catch a black kid with cigarettes, you're not 18, where did you get this from, nigger? See, Chauvin is the kind of guy that believes that white folks should get second chances, black folks shouldn't. Whether he's aware of this discrepancy or not, somewhere down the line, he believes that they are superior and we are inferior, much like I believe that George Floyd was superior to Chauvin. Not the one that got arrested, but the one that came out and never got in trouble after that. See, George Floyd moved somewhere to start over so as to stay out of trouble. But, as we already know, his white girlfriend, she wasn't even about none of them protests. He wouldn't want this. But the rest of the nation, they weren't looking and saying he was a saint. They were saying that he was killed for something that is not a deadly crime. It was not a capital punishment. He was killed for an unjust reason. That's what they were saying. That's what a lot of white folks were saying. It ain't got to be personal with a lot of them. BGS was simply saying to us that with these white folks that are sick of white folks BS that are protesting so that there won't be other George Floyds killed for, non-deadly reasons, that still in all you got white supremacists who are in power and wearing badges, and they have infiltrated police departments, and they're not going to stop doing what they're doing. Now, the ones higher up above them may be in favor of integration because we're 14% of the U.S. population, and they might be willing to absorb us so that we wouldn't be there anymore. They may be willing to do that, but you still have white supremacists behind badges that, with or without us being absorbed into the U.S. population, they're going to make sure that we get treated worse. Because that's what we were in the United States for. That's what we were brought to Brazil for. That's why we were taken into Cuba. That's why we were taken into Jamaica. We were taken into the Americas as a whole to be on the furthermucking bottom. And there are white supremacists that are going to make sure that it stays that way, no matter how many idness and pookies we get rid of, and no matter how highly we pull up our pants, no matter what suits we wear, no matter how conservative we are. And I'm for moral conservatism for black people. I'm all for it. I just want us to understand that while we can take your understanding of accountability, and yes, we do need it, BGS was saying when you do it, you're still going to have to contend with the outside enemy. You're not going to be able to escape having to fight them white folks if you want to remain a separate race and be treated equally. He didn't get a chance to say his piece. It was cold-blooded, and it was uncalled for not to disagree with him, but to tell him, fuck the shuck up old nigga. To curse him and call him an old nigga. That's what was wrong. He's not your enemy. He's not black folks' enemy. He's not trying to lead us down some path of self-destruction by getting us to drop all sense of accountability and responsibility for the decisions we make. I've actually listened to him. You probably have too. And he actually does say, these are the choices that we're going to make. We're going to be responsible because now we know what the options are. He's been telling sisters for the longest same thing you have. You choose what you choose, and you're going to deal with its consequences. You drive your men away, and they're going to go away, and you're going to be without them. And even now, when some of them are getting killed by police on camera so the world can see, which has always been going on, but now it's happening on camera. Even now, some of you are still sitting up and saying, well, this means we don't have anybody to date and marry. What about the human being? Not your date to pay for your dinners, not your workhorse to take care of you. What about the human being underneath? It still does not matter. He has addressed the way that many of the ladies have addressed the fact that black men get killed. He's addressed the way that they try to say that, well, black women are getting killed too. And what they really mean when they say it. When they say this, pretty much just to take any sympathy away from black men, even though most of black folks who get killed, armed or unarmed, let's say unarmed, are black men. That being said, I think you got the message. He's not the enemy, man. But really, bruh, we don't have to agree with every elder. But when we have an elder like this that's not one of them old fools telling the young folks stuff that really does hold them back in life, we should treat them like they're not enemies. We should disagree like they're not enemies. That's all I'm getting at. Because most days, you better than that. The other cats on the panel, I don't know them. Don't particularly care, especially a little big name. I don't particularly care to know. But I've heard you before. And most days, you don't stoop to that level. Not with elders that really don't mean you any harm. Most days, you're going in on people that, if you're going to go in on somebody, you're going in on somebody that actually provokes it. I want to see that old Mr. Fantastic come back. I hope that this has been a benefit. Assalamu alaikum to the audience, and thanks for listening. Black heart, black mind, black out.